Dude, pointed stick.
Pointed stick! Pointed stick!
Pointed stick.
Pointed stick.
Pointed stick.
Pointed stick!
Whoa, pointed stick.
That pointed stick.
Pointed stick!
Stick. We don't have any time for your trolling behavior on this channel. It just isn't welcome here. And so, good riddance to you.
All right, let me make sure everything's working here. Sounds like it is. All right. So I just felt like ranting today. Nothing about Vegas. Don't want to talk about Vegas. Don't care today. Want to talk about something that kind of is going through my head right now. And explain a little how I think about things. Now, I wrote a book. Well, I started to write a book, let's say, about 15, 20 years ago, something like that. And it was based on basically how to fuck with people, how to deal with people who are difficult to deal with, right? And the story behind that was the hard drive crashed, the computer crashed, took a shit, and about halfway through. And yeah, now in hindsight, I probably could have gotten it recovered, all that sort of bullshit. But at the time, I just didn't feel like dealing with it. So I started to once again, but on a different kind of level this time, different subject, different. And as I was doing some research into this, and I was dealing with various topics as far as how this goes, I kind of started thinking about things a little bit in this respect of good and evil. And I got to get my head straight on this because it's something that's been running through my head for days now. But, once you go on stream, of course, everything blanks out. So, obviously the idea of good and evil is based off the morality of the individual. There's all kinds of things that go into that. But, to me, basically what you're looking at is social norms, the idea of what is good and what is bad, divided down social norms. And, and so that's pretty easy to figure out, pretty standard. That's the easiest way to define it, and that's the easiest way to go through it. Everybody has their own set of morals. Everybody's different. So therefore, what's good to one person is maybe evil to another, blah, 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 stuff like that. But I'm just talking about basic social norms here. And what started this whole process was I was watching a douchebag on stream. And yes, I'm going to talk about YouTube a little bit, drama a little bit, not really my drama because I don't really give a shit. But, I'm watching a douchebag on stream. And it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. I don't give a shit. It doesn't fucking matter to me. I'm dead center of all of it. This dude obviously was or is, I guess you would say, a big Trump person. And I'm watching this guy, and I'm watching him be a complete ass and having complete retarded takes on things, right? One of the takes this guy was saying was about the EBT thing, right? And the take on this was so absolutely fucking stupid and retarded. It was, I don't know if this guy's got all the brain cells firing upstairs. I don't think he does. And, but his take was, well, I have food in my fridge, so you should have food in your fridge. So the EBT thing doesn't matter because all of you should have food in your fridge because I have it. And that's got to be one of the most smooth-brained arguments I've heard in a very long time. That is an argument that belongs on Twitter, truly. And so, as I'm looking at it, I'm like, this guy. Now, generally, I do agree with a lot of things pro-Trump, and I disagree with a lot of things pro-Trump. But and so I don't hold judgment on people who are into the guy, and I don't hold judgment on people who are against him for the most part, unless they come up with stupid arguments like that. But what I'm sitting here looking at is I'm like, you think you're an ally to a cause, because this guy is very, at one point he said, if you're not America first, get the fuck out of my chat. And then he later says, I'm accepting of everybody. You don't have to agree with me. And it's like, well, yeah, you're a contradictory piece of shit. But as I'm sitting there listening to the guy, and I'm like, you are, and it's the same thing with a lot of the Antifa stuff and all the idiots, that you see on the media, is you are your own worst enemy, right? You are the reason people call this a cult, because you are a cult-like person. And that's what that brings to the table, right? Because your takes are so outrageous and stupid that you are actually an enemy to the exact cause that you're supporting. Now, what's it got to do with good and evil, man? Basically, what I'm trying to say is this dude is not an ally to his own cause. He's actually an adversary to it, because he makes people look stupid who agree with him, or who agree with them on some issues and don't agree with them on others, whatever. So the other thing I was watching, and where I'm going to go with this, is I was watching last night some dudes in prison. Killed another dude in prison. I guess it was a big story. I don't know. I missed it, but, because I don't really care about this sort of thing normally. But it was interesting because it was local. I had to deal with some local people and stuff like that. And, but these three dudes who were criminal murderers, who had murdered multiple people in the past, and that's why they were in prison in the first place. Bad people, by social standards. And that's kind of why where I'm going with this. Murdered another dude, bad person by social standards. Another murderer, another mass murderer. In fact, he is a leader of a major prison gang. And he was killed by other people within his own prison gang. And so I'm sitting there thinking, good and evil, right? I don't think good and evil is based off a person and a person's characteristics. I don't think a person, unless you're talking about extreme cases, right? Charles Manson, people like that, serial killers, Stephen Paddock. I don't think people are inherently evil within themselves. I think their actions dictate good and evil, and don't dictate good and evil upon them as a person. Dictate good and evil based upon the actions that are taken. What I'm saying is, I don't think people are inherently good or evil for the most part. Like I said, there are those extreme cases, and there are going to be those arguments that you can make against that ideology. But the actions of people are based upon good and evil, right? And I've always felt this way. And I don't think it's a popular train of thought amongst people. I really don't. The idea of giving to charity is a good thing, right? By social standards, that's a good thing. But what happens when you have somebody giving to charity just so they can get a tax break because they needed the money off their taxes? They really don't give a shit about the charity that they're funding or they're donating to. What happens when you donate let's say, a guitar to a school, And that guitar, you bought it you picked it up in a pawn shop for $300. You donate it to a school, and they write you a check for $1,200, or they write you a receipt for $1,200. They don't write you a check, obviously, but because it is a donation, but they write you a receipt for $1,200. Now you just wrote down $1,200 as a donation for your taxes at the end of the year. Good or evil? You donated something, but you swindled yourself into manipulating the situation of that donation. Good or evil? So there's an interesting line there that, I would say the idea of the donation was a good thing. The idea of utilizing that donation towards subterfuge on your taxes is a bad thing. Now you can disagree with taxes. Now that's another moral debate we can get into, but I'm just saying in general here, without getting into that crazy argument of whether taxes are moral or not. Another thing, something that hits a little close to home and makes a lot of sense, probably only to me, to be honest. I grew up in a neighborhood with a lot of gangs, right? Well, let's say I grew up in a neighborhood with a gang, surrounded by many others. And yeah, regardless of what they want to call themselves, I know they hate calling themselves gang, but nevertheless, to me, that's what they were. And these people hurt a lot of people, did a lot of bad things, like to fight. But were they bad? Were they good, or were they evil? I don't think they were either. Personally, to me, they weren't. These people, so you take an individual action. For instance, they go beat up somebody who was talking shit at the local liquor store. Now, that's a bad thing, right? You beat up a civilian that you had the power structure to be able to overcome. And so that would be an evil thing, right? There was a lot of that. There was a lot of mindless, stupid violence, right? Then you had the fact that these cholos like to go down to hey, how you doing? Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not talking about Vegas right now. But good to see you, bro. But so here, okay, so let's go back a little bit, right? You got a guy goes over to the junior high school and walks up on two people. I've told this story before multiple times because there's a lot of lessons to be learned within the story. And walks up to two people and knocks one of them out. Just walks up and, says a few words and just knocks him the fuck out. Knocks him out cold. Now, it was a little bit of a sucker punch. The guy wasn't really ready for it. So, yeah, it was not the greatest look. But, if you look at it from face value, you're like, oh, that was bad. That shouldn't have happened. Like, violence is bad, right? By social norms, social morality, that's bad. That's wrong. The thing is, those kids, the kid that he hit and the two kids he was basically over there to threaten were there to beat up younger kids, beat up little kids. And that's why he was there. And that's why he did it. So was that action in itself good, or was that evil? So the lines get blurred. And the lines are tough to dictate. And I think this is a problem that a lot of people have, right? I think a lot of people have this issue of they look at a person and they're able to discern whether they think that is a good or bad person. Now, to me, I don't look at things that way. I never have. And a lot of this is from life experiences like the ones I'm talking about. Now, these gangbangers, these kids, you're automatically going to assume, oh, a gangbanger's bad. Gangs are bad. And I'd agree with that for the most part. But are they? Are they? These people used to beat up white supremacists, right? There's one evil in this world everybody will agree with: white supremacists, racism on a global scale, on a mass scale. That is one of the evils in this world that is pretty much universally accepted as evil. And so, yeah, that was something these guys used to enjoy doing. They used to enjoy fighting the Nazis and the skinheads that were local around here. And they used to love doing it because they just wanted to fight somebody. They wanted to fight. Violence. Violence is bad. Violence is an evil thing, right? But when violence is placed upon a deserving party like that, is it truly evil? Is it truly an evil act? We have a moral dilemma within that. Most people would. And so what I'm looking at is I've seen a lot of drama in various YouTube communities, we'll put it, which is why I'm kind of talking about it. And the drama is centered around whether a person is a good person or a bad person. So, you know, if a person goes and agrees with somebody you dislike, then there's a quick snap to judgment of an enemy of my enemy is my friend. And this is a lot of this is centered around, you know, the current environment, the current structure of what's going on within various societies up in Portland mainly, but all over America right now. You know, the pro-Trump crowd versus the anti-Trump crowd, I guess you could say, but it's not really like that as far as I'm concerned, because there's a lot of different issues within that cloud it up. But, you know, you do get those zealot people who are very in tune with one side or the other. And again, that's where the cult-like behavior comes in, stuff like that. But I've seen a lot of people doing this, the enemy, my enemy is, or the friend of my enemy is my enemy kind of thing. And I just don't really see things that way. And I don't understand it. Because my brain doesn't work that way. My brain's never worked that way. And maybe it's just life experiences. Like I said, I've seen a lot of bad things happen. Seen a lot of bad things happen to good people. Seen a lot of bad things happen to bad people. And, you know, within those experiences, you know, I've come to realize that even the most twisted person that you think you know can be justified in some of the actions that they do. One of the things that always comes to mind within talking about this and the thought on this subject is child molesters in prison. That's another evil that I think everybody can get behind, right? Racism, child molesters. And, you know, when they go to prison, they usually don't do very well. They generally don't do very well at all. And, you know, and they're usually attacked by other inmates and generally by the prison gangs. The prison gangs usually hold that front. And the prison gang may be the Aryan Brotherhood, racist, evil organization, right? But when they're cleaning house on somebody that's a child molester, somebody that's abusing children out in society, how evil are they at that point? So I don't see the people necessarily as evil, but the actions is either good or evil within that. Now you can argue, I think the main argument would be, you know, a person's actions will dictate whether they're good or evil by the balance of how much good they do within society versus how much bad they do within society. But I think that's a hard line, and it's up to the individual at that point to deal with that. And so in researching all this stuff, to me, it's kind of comes up with a moral dilemma, right? A very tricky and difficult moral dilemma. In the old days, I watched a guy on YouTube named Michael Francis. Now, Michael Francis is an ex-mafia guy. If anyone's ever watched him, you know what he does. You know how he is. I'm not the biggest fan, but he did talk one time about it, and he's definitely a right-leaning character. But he did talk one time about how all these riots, all these protests, all the BLM stuff, when that was hidden in 2020, 2021, would not have happened under mob rule, because the mobs took care of their neighborhoods and they didn't allow things like that to happen within their neighborhoods. Now, within the structure of where I grew up in, it was similar. It was the same thing. BLM and whatever, these other stupid groups decided to come into the area at one point and march down a major street in the neighboring city. And what was told to me is somebody threw a brick through a window of a liquor store, and that person ended up in the hospital because people who lived in that neighborhood took care of their neighborhood, and they didn't allow that sort of thing to happen in the neighborhood. And violence for the sake of good, I mean, is that really a thing? And this is just a small scale, right? This is small scale neighborhood stuff, right? It was the same thing in the neighborhood I grew up in. The people who ran the neighborhood, for better or worse, they took care of that neighborhood. They didn't allow anybody else come into that neighborhood and do any shenanigans. So it's always funny to me because growing up, I always saw these people as neither good nor bad. I saw a lot of what they did as bad. Violence is bad. Violence is almost always bad. Anybody that's watched a fist fight on the street that you're not, well, whether you're concerned with it or not, whether you're involved in it or not, knows how ugly that is. A lot of people, you glamorize it in the movies and stuff like that. It is what it is. But the reality of all of that is not what you see in the movies. A fight between two people, whether it's 2, whether it's 4, whether it's 10, whatever it happens to be, when you see that violence break out, in the beginning, it's horrifying, right? Because you don't know where that's going to end. You have no idea where it's going to end. And as long as you're not involved in it, the adrenaline's not running through you, you're watching this as third party and you just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if we're going to end up, running from this event because somebody pulls a gun out. You don't know whether somebody's going to end up in the hospital, in the morgue. You don't know what the fuck's going to happen here. You don't know where it's going to stop. Violence is ugly. It's generally considered a bad thing. I'll tell another story that kind of puts this into perspective for me. I had a guy in the neighborhood, man, did some bad stuff, dude. Did some really bad stuff. Ended up in juvenile hall for a bit. I don't think he ever ended up in prison, but was a bad guy. Everybody knew who he was. Nobody messed with him. He was scary as shit. And this dude, he was no nonsense, man. Like I said, he did some bad things, some people, and I can't, let's just say I felt that this person was would have been the definition of evil. But one day, I had a friend who was in school. She went to the restroom during class and was raped in the restroom by a guy in school. School wasn't going to do anything about it because they couldn't prove it. They didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't want to admit that it happened. The police weren't going to do anything about it because she didn't go to him right away. And she lived in a neighborhood of some scary people, but she wasn't part of that neighborhood. She wasn't considered, one of the little homegirls and shit like that. So, but she happened to be a friend of mine. She confided in me and let me know what was going on. Well, we let everybody know what happened because fuck that guy. And one day that dude decided to walk into the wrong liquor store on our side of the street. And this bad dude ended up being in there. This bad dude gave him the beating of a lifetime, man. It was fairly impressive. It ended up in the hospital that I know of. He ended up running out of there, so he did get out on his own 2 feet, but he got pretty fucked up from that. He didn't show up back to, I don't think he ever went back to high school. I think after that, he ended up transferring out because, it was the same high school this person went to. But good and evil, right? It's one of the most sick and sadistic, twisted people I know. And he stuck up for this person. This person he didn't even know. He only did it because I knew her. She's a friend of mine. He met her, but didn't give a shit about her. Just felt that what had happened was wrong. Nobody was going to do anything about it. He did it himself. Took it in his own hands. And, can't say that I was upset about it at all. So good and evil, right? Is he good? Is he evil? Well, if I told you some of the other shit that this person pulled off, which I'm not going to do because I'm not here to rat people out for things that they did, and I'm just talking in general terms. I think most people would consider him socially wrong, socially evil. But this is why, when I come to this question of who's good and who's evil, I have extreme issues with the definitions of that. Yes, this person I would consider a bad dude. I know that's kind of a shit term to use, but I ain't going to use anything stronger right now. But yeah, I consider this person, for the most part, kind of, fuck it, I'll say, man, I consider him an evil person, right? I consider him a bad guy. Bad part of society. He's still out there, man. I've actually run into him a few times in recent times too. But, at that point, he stuck up for a girl who nobody else, including the school where she was molested, was willing to stick up for her. Nobody was willing to do it. Like, police department wasn't even willing to do it. There's nothing. Nobody was going to do anything about it, man. And this poor girl was going to have to go back to that school and face that person on a daily basis. So, violence. Violence is evil. In that case, I don't know if it was. Because the result was positive. The result was that person fucked around, found out, and never did again, as far as I know. Now, he's obviously not in my life after that. He disappeared, didn't go to the same high school anymore. Obviously vanished from my life completely. And that's positive, but that was the result. That was the result of a dude that I would consider evil doing something that I consider a good thing. But doing something that is evil to get a result that was positive. It's fucking crazy. It's a crazy dilemma. Right? It's a very crazy dilemma. But the only way that I could break this down is to say that it's not the person that's good or evil. It's the actions of that person that are good or evil. And there are going to be some people, like I said, the outliers. They're going to be able to say, nah, that person's just fucking evil, dude. Charles Manson, for instance. People like that. Morally, socially bankrupt people completely. Beyond redemption. But, and I'm sure the prisons are full of those people. I'm sure there's a lot of them. But to me, in my life, in my society, all I can do is look at the action and say, was that action good? Or was it bad? And that's the dilemma that I wanted to talk about today. That's what's running through my head. And that is kind of the question that I have in my head at this point. And with that, I think I'm going to let this go.
Dude, pointed stick.
Pointed stick. Pointed stick.
Pointed stick.
Pointed stick.
Pointed stick?
Pointed stick.
Whoa, pointed stick.
That pointed stick.
Pointed stick.
Stick. We don't have any time for your trolling behavior on this channel. It just isn't welcome here. And so, good riddance to you.